Hey, it's Nathan. Before we start, I want you to think about the worst thing you could ever come home to. Got it? Now I want you to understand that the man in tonight's story came home to something worse than that. He came home 2 days early from a storm job, with a gift for his boy on the passenger seat, and found a crowd of strangers in his backyard, cash changing hands, and his 13-year-old son bleeding in the grass while grown men cheered. And the person holding the camera, laughing, collecting the bills, was the boy's own mother. What happened to that father in the next 10 minutes should have killed him. 21 times, it almost did. But this is a story about what happens when cruel people mistake a patient man for a weak one, and what happens when that man's little brother, a man who taught soldiers how to end fights for a living, picks up the phone. There's a real lesson in here about underground betting rings, about how they find the desperate and the vain, and about why rage loses fights that discipline wins. So get comfortable, because every turn in this one is earned. Let's get into it. Clay Weller had spent 20 years learning that electricity does not care how strong you are. It only cares whether you respect it. He was a journeyman lineman out of Hackberry, Oklahoma, a crew chief on a transmission team that chased storm damage across 3 states, and the men who worked under him liked to say that Clay had 2 speeds, calm and calmer. When a derecho took down 40 miles of line outside Fort Smith, when other crews were shouting over the radio, Clay's voice came through flat and slow, like a man reading a grocery list. You do not rush current. You route it. You isolate the fault. You ground both sides. And you never, ever let it surprise you. That was the whole religion of his life, and it had kept every man on his crew alive for 11 straight seasons. He'd learned the calm from his father, Emery Weller, a fence builder with forearms like railroad ties who had raised Clay and his younger brother Zeke alone after their mother passed. Emery had hung a heavy bag in the barn and taught both boys to box the old way. Feet first, chin down, breathe. But he had one rule he repeated so often the brothers could recite it in their sleep. Men bet on horses and men bet on cards, Emery said, but you never bet on a boy. A boy in a fight is not a contest. It's a failure. Somebody's failure, and the only thing a grown man should ever do at a fight involving a child is stop it. Clay was 41 now, and he had never once seen the old man proven wrong. Clay's own boy, Ollie, was 13, and he was nothing like the men in the family, which is exactly why Clay loved watching him. Ollie was lean and quiet and patient with machines. He rebuilt bicycles in the garage sale wrecks that he stripped, trued, greased, and sold. And he kept his money in a coffee can with a rubber band around it, saving for a torque wrench set he'd circled in a catalog. He was the kind of kid who apologized to the dog when he stepped over it. He was not soft. He was gentle, which is a different thing, and Clay knew the difference even if the world sometimes didn't. The person who didn't was sleeping on the other side of Clay's bed. Rochelle Weller had been the loudest, brightest thing in the county when Clay married her, a woman who could make a gas station feel like a party. But somewhere in the last few years, the brightness had curdled into appetite. She wanted more than Hackberry had shelves for. She'd found a taste for the casino boats over the state line, for scratch tickets bought in bulk, for the particular electric feeling of money that might multiply. Clay had paid off her card twice and closed it once, and both times she'd cried, and both times, he realized later, she had cried about being caught, not about what she'd done. The storm contract that summer was a big one. 5 weeks in Arkansas, rebuilding what the derecho had torn out. And the money was too good for a man with a mortgage to turn down. The morning he left, Clay stood in the garage with Ollie and promised they'd finish the boys' project bike together in August. Ollie nodded and said, "Take pictures of the big towers." Rochelle waved from the porch with her phone already in her other hand. 5 weeks. Clay would replay that goodbye 1,000 times in the months to come, looking for the thing he should have seen. But faults don't show until there's load on the line. That's the cruelty of them. Everything looks fine until the current comes home. The itch found Rochelle before the first week was out. It started at Cimarron Lanes, the bowling alley on the county road, where a Thursday night crowd gathered in the back lot around tailgates and coolers, and where she first heard the name Bo Crandall said the way small towns say the names of men they're afraid to be seen admiring. Bo was 50, thick through the chest, with a boxer's flattened knuckles, a promoter's grin, and a cauliflower left ear he wore like jewelry. He'd been a fight man his whole life, never a great one in the ring, but a genius outside it. Bo ran what the old-timers called smokers. Unsanctioned fights, no commission, no gloves half the time. Staged in barns and equipment yards and the fenced backyards of houses where nobody asked questions. Men paid to watch. Bo booked the side bets, and Bo's book never lost, because Bo decided who fought whom, and Bo knew the answer before the first bell. He was also, Rochelle learned quickly, generous in the way that owns people. He covered her losses at the boat like it was nothing, peeled bills off a roll the size of a soup can. He told her she was wasted in hackberry, that she had a promoter's eye, that a woman who understood a crowd was worth 10 men who understood fists. Within a month, his dually was parked in Clay Weller's driveway like it had always lived there, and Bo Crandall was sleeping in Clay Weller's bed, and the neighbors, the ones who liked Clay, kept their porch lights off and minded their business. All but one. Erlene Tapp, 71, a retired algebra teacher who lived behind the chain link on the east side, had taught too many boys in her 40 years to mind her own business. She kept a notebook. She wrote down dates. It was, she would say later, just an old habit of showing your work. There was one more Crandall who came with the package. Tice, Bo's nephew, was 22, 6'2", and built out of gym mirrors and grievance. He'd washed out of 2 amateur MMA gyms in Tulsa, not for lack of talent, but because coaches watched how he behaved when someone weaker was in front of him. And Bo had taken him in the way a man takes in a mean dog, not to fix it, but because meanness has uses. Tice did Bo's collecting. Tice moved Bo's coolers. And Tice, bored and cruel on a July afternoon, was the first one who put gloves on Ollie Weller in the backyard, laughing, calling it training. Ollie's text to his father got shorter that month. Busy. Fine. Bike's fine. Clay, 90 feet up a transmission tower in Arkansas, read them in his harness at lunch and felt something he had no name for yet. A hum in the line, a load reading that didn't match the weather. He finished the job 6 days early, took the highway bonus, and didn't tell anyone he was coming. He wanted it to be a surprise. On the passenger seat, wrapped in the catalog page it was circled on, was the torque wrench set. He rolled into Hackberry on a Saturday evening in the gold hour, windows down. 2 blocks from the house he noticed the trucks, a dozen of them, parked wrong, half on the grass, plates from 3 counties, and his stomach went quiet the way it did before a breaker blew. He didn't park in his driveway. Some instinct made him leave the truck on the street and walk, and that is why nobody saw Clay Weller come home. He heard it before he saw it. Men's voices in his backyard, bunched and rhythmic, the specific ugly music of a crowd that wants something to happen to somebody. He came through the side gate, past his own garden hose, and stood in the shadow of his own garage, and what he saw there rearranged his life. 30 men stood in a ring on his son's grass. Folding table, cooler, a cardboard box lid full of cash and betting slips in a woman's lap, his wife's lap. And Rochelle was laughing with her phone up, filming, taking 20s from a man in a feed cap and tucking them under her thigh. In the middle of the circle, stripped to the waist with 14-ounce gloves someone had put on him as a joke of mercy, was Ollie. His nose was flattened and running red down his chin and chest. His left eye was closing. He was 13 years old and 110 pounds, and he was staggering in little circles, trying to keep his hands up the way nobody had ever properly taught him. And across from him, grinning, cutting off the grass with the patience of a man who has been told to make it last, was Tice Crandall, 22, 205 pounds. Bo stood at the rope line they'd strung from the swing set, taking side action with a pencil behind his ear. Later, in the hospital, Clay would remember thinking one absurd, perfect thought. The round wasn't being timed. Nobody was counting anything. There was no bell in that yard to save anybody, because it wasn't a fight, it was a harvest. Ollie went down on one knee, and the crowd made that sound, that rising oh of money in motion, and Rochelle zoomed in, and Bo called out, he's fine, let him finish, there's a round left on the card. And Clay Weller walked out of the shadow of his garage into the middle of 30 strangers and picked his son up off the grass. For one long second, nobody moved. Some of the men, the ones who were fathers, looked at the fence, at their boots, anywhere else. Clay didn't shout. He put Ollie behind him, against the garage wall, and he said, in the voice he used on storm radios, exactly 5 words. It's over, go home. And it almost worked. That's the part that would haunt the honest men in that yard. The crowd was already turning, already ashamed, wallets already closing, because a calm man saying an obvious truth has a voltage of its own. But Bo Crandall had $11,000 of side action on that card, and a book doesn't pay out on it's over. Bo looked at Tice and tipped his head at Clay, and said the sentence that would eventually be read out loud in a courtroom, because Rochelle's phone was still recording when he said it. New fight. Same bet. The husband. Ollie screamed for them to stop before it started. Clay got his hands up. Emery Weller's son, feet first, chin down, and for the first 10 seconds of it, 41-year-old Clay Weller was winning, which nobody in that yard except Tice would ever admit. Then someone behind him, the feed cap man, the slips would show he had $200 on Tice, handed Tice the aluminum bat they used to prop the gate. What happened after that, the medical examiner's report would describe in the flat language of load-bearing structures: comminuted fractures of the left ulna and radius, fractured right forearm, 8 broken ribs, fractured scapula, ruptured spleen, orbital fracture, 21 distinct impact injuries. 21. Clay knew the number before the doctors did, because he counted them as they landed. Counting was the only thing left he could control, and control was the only thing he had never given anyone, so he lay on his own grass with his forearms over his skull, the way linemen are taught to survive a fall. Protect the head, give them the arms. The arms are tools. Tools can be replaced. And he counted, and he did not scream, and his silence frightened those men more than any sound he could have made. He heard Rochelle laughing somewhere above the ringing. He heard her say, the recording would preserve it forever, word for word. Say goodnight, tough guy. Then they dragged him across the yard by his boots and left him on the oil-stained concrete of his own garage, and Bo turned the crowd around like a tour guide and said, all right, intermission's over. They went back to it. That was the detail that broke people at the trial. With the boy's father folded and bleeding on the garage floor, the yard filled back up with noise. And the fight, the boy, went on. Clay lay in the dark and did what he did on every disaster site in 3 states. Assessment. Both forearms broken, the left one badly. Bone in places bone should not be. Breathing wet on the right side. Vision doubling. He could not make a fist, and he could not stand. And through the wall he could hear the crowd wanting his son to fall down again. His phone had skittered under the workbench when they dropped him. It took Clay Weller, by his own courtroom testimony, 4 minutes to cross 11 feet of concrete. He moved the way you move under live wire. Inches, then rest, then inches, leaving a smeared red map of the journey behind him. And when he reached the phone, he could not grip it. So he dialed with the knuckle of his little finger, the only joint on his left hand that still answered. He did not dial 911. He would explain that choice on the stand. And when he did, the courtroom went so quiet you could hear the clerk's pen. An ambulance, he said, was 25 minutes out on a Saturday night. A deputy, maybe more, and 1 deputy against 30 drunk gamblers would wait at the curb for backup. And my son did not have 25 minutes of fight left in him. So I called the only man I know who is faster than help. I called my brother. Zeke Weller was 19 miles away in a Quonset hut on the county line, teaching a Saturday evening class, when his phone lit up with his brother's name. Zeke was 36, and what Zeke did for a living took a paragraph to explain, so Hackberry mostly didn't try. He had spent 11 years overseas as a contract combatives instructor, paramilitary units, close protection teams, men whose job descriptions were classified in 3 languages, teaching professional violence to professional men in places where the loser of a fight did not get up. He'd come home 2 years ago, quieter than he left, and opened a little school with his training partner Cass Rooker, where he taught farm kids and nurses, and 1 arthritic judge, how to fall down without breaking, how to breathe, how to leave. Zeke's whole philosophy fit on the hand-painted sign over the mats. The fight you win is the one that doesn't happen. He had not raised his voice since he'd come home. His students had never seen what he actually was. On the phone, Clay's voice was a whisper with liquid in it, and it said, "Brother, I need your help. Your nephew is in danger. Come fast." And then, because he was Clay, and because assessment is a religion, 30-plus males, alcohol, 1 bat, backyard, I'm down but stable, go to the boy first. Cass Rooker would testify that Zeke set the phone down gently, like it was sleeping, and told the class, "We're done early," and that his voice was so level that the students laughed, thinking it was a joke. It took Zeke 19 minutes to drive 19 miles, and Cass, following in his own truck and calling 911 on the way, because Zeke, even then, was building the record clean, never once saw brake lights. What happened in that backyard over the next 6 minutes became a kind of county scripture, told and retold, wrong in most versions. The prosecution called it lawful defense of others and declined to charge any of it. The men who were there called it other things. Here is what the evidence, Rochelle's own phone, abandoned still recording on the folding table when she ran, actually shows. It shows a Ram 2500 stopping in the alley without urgency, like a neighbor arriving with a casserole. It shows a man of average size walk through the gate and stand still for 3 full seconds, reading the yard the way his brother read storm damage. It shows him walk, not run, to the center, and place himself between the boy and Tice Crandall, and put one hand flat on Tice's chest. Almost polite. The audio picks up Zeke Weller's only complete sentence of the evening. He's done for the night. Tice swung on him. The film shows the rest at the speed it happened, which is to say, barely. Wrist, elbow, shoulder. Down. Tice Crandall, 205 pounds, 22 years old, folded onto the grass with his own arm behind him, like a man arrested by gravity itself, and the sound he made, high, disbelieving, then pleading, was the sound the neighbors 3 doors down described to the responding deputies as somebody screaming for mercy. He was not being hurt. That was the terrible elegance of it. The doctors confirmed it later. Nothing was broken. He was being held at the exact edge of where hurt begins, by a man who knew that edge the way a machinist knows 1/1000th of an inch, and he was screaming because his body understood, faster than his pride did, that the edge was a choice being made on his behalf, 60 times a second, by somebody else. Beau Crandall made it 4 steps toward the bat before the film shows him stopping, not because anyone touched him, because Zeke looked at him. Men under oath tried to describe that look and gave up. Beau put his hands at his sides. The crowd that had roared for a bleeding 8th grader could not find one man willing to step onto the grass, and so they did what crowds of that kind do when the arithmetic turns. They evaporated. Engines in the dark. Slips left blowing across the lawn like ticker tape after a parade nobody won. Zeke zip-tied Tice to the swing set with the ties from Beau's own cooler bag, sat Beau against the fence with a sentence nobody's microphone caught. Beau would never repeat it, not even to his lawyer. And then, only then, did he run, to the garage, to his brother. The first thing the paramedics heard when they rolled up was not screaming at all. It was Zeke Weller, kneeling on bloody concrete with his brother's head in his hands, saying over and over, softly, "I've got him. I've got you both." And Clay, who had stayed conscious through 21 and had no medical business being awake, answered, "They'll tell you I fell off a ladder." Get the phone on the table, and went out like a light, smiling, because even flat on the ground, some men are still running the whole board. 3 days of surgeries put Clay back into one piece. Plates in both forearms, a spleen he donated to the cause, a chest tube he'd describe as the least fun straw in Oklahoma. Ollie's face would heal straight. The surgeons were more worried about the rest of him, the part X-rays don't show, and so was Clay. The boy sat by his father's bed folding and unfolding the catalog page from the torque wrench set, and the first time he spoke about it, what he said was, "I didn't want to fight, Dad. They said if I won 3 more, Mom got the money back she lost." Clay kept his voice at storm radio flat, said, "You never had to win anything to be mine," and waited until his son was asleep to let the machines watch what his face did next. Because here is what was happening outside that hospital room, and it is the reason this story has a 3rd act. Beau Crandall bonded out in 40 hours. Tice in 24. The county attorney, a decent, buried man named Whit Granger, came to the hospital himself to explain the arithmetic. Yes, there was video. Yes, there were charges. But the yard had been Beau's stage, and Rochelle's house too. Consent would be argued. Half the witnesses were betters who'd sooner move counties than testify to being at a smoker, and Beau's lawyer was already floating misdemeanor endangerment and time served. It happens in backyards all over, son. Juries call it roughhousing. Detective Sharon Pinkney, who had photographed Clay's garage floor without a word, was blunter. Beau's smokers had been an open secret for 9 years. Barns, yards, a decommissioned grain elevator, and he had never once been charged, because Beau was smoke. No fixed venue, no paper, cash only, and everybody's cousin in his pocket. "You want him," she said. "You don't need a witness. You need his book. His book is other people's money. And Rochelle had retained a lawyer from Tulsa, filed for emergency custody of Ollie, and told 2 church friends, who told everyone, that Clay had attacked her guests. Her phone was in evidence, but her lawyer was fighting the warrant's scope and the cloud backup, months of footage, other Saturdays, other people's sons, sat behind a password and a subpoena crawls. So, assessment. Clay Weller lay in a hospital bed with both arms in fiberglass and did what he had done his whole life. You do not rush current. You do not fight it head on. It will kill you precisely as fast as you are strong. You route it. You give it a path it wants more than the path it's on, and you let it destroy itself against its own load. Bo's current was money. Specifically, other men's money. The regional books out of Tulsa whose cash Bo held and moved and skimmed. Hard men whom Bo feared the way normal men fear weather. Bo's fault, his cracked insulation, was vanity. The unshakable lifelong certainty that he could read a fight before the bell. 20 years of fixed cards had taught Bo Crandall that he had a gift, when what he actually had was a habit of cheating. Clay lay there under the IV drip, and he took the pencil Ollie had been sketching with, and on the back of the torque wrench catalog page he wrote, left-handed, in handwriting the museum of the County Historical Society now owns. He bets. We ground him. And underneath, a circuit diagram. A load. A switch. A path to ground. When Zeke came that evening, Clay held it up, and for the first time since the yard, the younger Weller smiled and said, "Who's the load?" And Clay said, "Cass has a nephew." Hub Collie was 26, 6'6", and drove a feed truck out of Claremore. He giggled when he was nervous. He called everybody ma'am, including the mailman, and he had spent his 20s as the most decorated amateur heavyweight in 2 states never to turn pro, because his mother asked him not to, and Hub minded his mother. Nobody in Bo's world had ever heard of him, because Bo's world watched fights, and Hub had spent 4 years winning them in armories in Kansas. The plan Clay built from a hospital bed over the next month was, Pinckney would say later, the cleanest sting she'd seen a civilian design, and it worked, because every piece of it was true. Zeke and Cass, with the burn unit at Hillcrest as beneficiary, the unit that patches linemen, the unit every man on every crew in the state tithes to without being asked, announced a sanctioned charity fight night, the Hackberry gloves, real commission sanction, real refs, real gloves, headgear, doctors ringside, proceeds to the burn center, a card of local amateurs. And at the top of the card, as a favor to the organizers, a novelty bout, Tice Crandall, who had, incredibly, kept training through his bail conditions, and whose uncle was loudly telling 3 counties that the Wellers had gotten lucky and his boy would prove it, against a big, soft-looking nobody from Claremore, that the poster, with lawyerly honesty, listed only as Hub, Doughboy Collie, and a record of no professional fights. Bo could not resist it, and everyone who built the trap knew he couldn't, because resisting it would have required Bo to believe, for one afternoon, that he could be wrong about a fight. Here was his nephew's redemption, his own name's redemption, in a legal ring where nobody could say he'd rigged it. Better, here was a hall full of squares and church folks and burn unit nurses, a card full of feel-good amateurs, and one bout, the big boy against the joke from Claremore, that every instinct in Bo's cheating lifetime scored as free money. Bo did what Clay's diagram said he would do, what he had done every day for 20 years. He opened a book on it, and because he was drowning, legal fees, a defense retainer, and the Tulsa men already cold about the noise around his name, he did not book it small. He pooled everything he held, his own roll and the regional books' float, $180,000, and he put it on Tice, laying it off across every gambler in his phone, at odds his vanity set. The slips this time were printed. It was, the prosecutors would marvel, the only honest bet Bo Crandall ever booked. That was the trap. It had to be honest. Nobody fixed anything. Nobody had to. Hub Collie was simply, quietly, catastrophically better, and 20 years of fixing fights had left Bo Crandall the one man in Oklahoma least equipped to see it. Fight night filled the fairgrounds hall to the walls. Ollie sat ringside between his father, casts freshly off, arms thin, and his great instrument of an uncle. And if you want to know what the Wellers are, know this. Clay made Ollie ask to be there, twice, and told him he could leave at any second. And Ollie stayed, because the doctor Ollie was seeing on Thursdays had told Clay the boy needed to watch a fight that had rules. He needed to see the difference. The whole town saw it. 3 rounds, no knockdowns in the first. Hub let it live a while, gentle as his mother raised him. And in the third, one short right hand, thrown with mercy Tice Crandall had never once extended to anybody, and the redemption of the Crandalls went down like a folding chair. The referee counted, out loud, official, sanctioned, a grown man counting over a Crandall, while a hall full of witnesses watched, and Detective Pinkney, standing at the back with a very good view of Beau's face, said it looked less like a man losing money than a man watching his religion fail. And then she and 6 deputies and 2 agents from the State Gaming Commission, holding warrants a judge had signed that afternoon. Probable cause built from the slips Beau's runners had been printing all week, 3 of which had been sold, regrettably for Beau, to Gaming Commission undercovers, walked out of the crowd and took the book. The ledger in the truck, the phones, the float that wasn't Beau's. And on those phones, unencrypted, because vain men never believe the flood is coming for them. 9 years. Venues, dates, takes, names, and 41 videos of other Saturdays sent to Beau proudly, from Rochelle's number. The Tulsa men got their money back the legal way, eventually, minus what the state kept, which is to say Beau's debt to them survived in the way debts to such men survive, patiently. His gym lease, his dually, the roll, gone by Christmas. Rochelle's lawyer stopped fighting the cloud subpoena the day the ledger phones surfaced, and traded what was left. She pled to child neglect and profiting from a felony, testified against Beau in a courtroom where her own recordings played on a screen the size of a garage door, and heard a judge, the arthritic one, it happens, from Zeke's Tuesday class, terminate her custodial rights over the boy she'd zoomed in on. She works at a distribution center outside Muskogee now. Ollie has read her letters. He hasn't answered them yet, and both Weller brothers, who know everything about time, have told him there's no clock on it. Tice took a plea, child abuse, aggravated assault, and will be 31 when he's out, and the men inside, who have their own arithmetic about people who do things to kids, have reportedly made his sentence educational. And Beau Crandall stood in a federal-style line of state counts, running an illegal gambling enterprise. 29 counts trimmed for trial economy down to a rounder number, plus the assault, plus the boy. And when the clerk read the final tally of charges he would answer for, the number was 21. Nobody in the prosecutor's office ever admitted trimming the list to land there. Pinkney, asked about it once, looked out the window and said the math just come out fair. Clay Weller sat in the front row with both rebuilt forearms crossed and counted every one. The Wellers finished the bike in August, a month late, with the torque wrench set. Ollie sold it for $90 and put the money in the coffee can, and then, in September, he asked his uncle a question, standing in the door of the Quonset hut with his helmet under his arm. And Zeke looked at him a long time and then said, Tuesdays. Feet first. Chin down, we start with falling. He's not training to fight anybody, that's the point of the place. He's training so that nobody can ever again make his body do something his heart said no to. And the last time I got an update, he can put a 200-pound man on the ground gently, which is the family style. Clay took the local crew chief job, home every night. He kept the catalog page. It's framed in the garage, blood spotted, next to the circuit diagram. He bets. We ground him. And under it, on a brass plate Zeke had made, it says the sentence their father used to say in the barn, the one the whole thing was always about, you never bet on a boy. So that's the story of the Weller brothers. And I've been thinking all week about why it won't leave me alone. Here's what I keep coming back to. Every dangerous person in that backyard misread the same thing. They saw calm and called it weakness. Rochelle saw a husband who paid off her cards quietly and decided quiet meant blind. Beau saw a man who wouldn't brawl and booked him as a victim. Tice saw a 13-year-old who apologized to dogs and saw prey. And every one of them learned that calm is not the absence of force. It's force, held. Clay took 21 swings and never stopped thinking. Zeke ended a 30-man yard without breaking a bone. That's not luck. That's 2 men who trained their whole lives to control the one thing you can always control, which is yourself. And there's a second lesson, the one I'd put on a billboard. Those betting rings are real. They live on desperation and vanity. They find the person in your family who's losing, and offer them a way to win that costs somebody smaller everything. The tell is always the same: money that needs a victim. If somebody's payday requires a person who can't say no, a kid, a broke man, a scared woman, you are not looking at a game. You're looking at a harvest, and the only move is the one Emery Weller taught. You stop it, or you're in it. Be the kind of calm that cruelty regrets. If this one stayed with you, you know where the like button is, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night, tough guy.